Hello, everyone, and welcome to my lunchtime chat, which is sponsored by Our Black Hair Matters. Today, we are discussing what you should know before purchasing products for hair care and your overall health, because we want you to stop being bamboozled. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So on today's live, I am here with a good friend and colleague, Dr. Jarrad Hampton-Marcell. He is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And so he has studied how microbes affect the status of human health, which is oftentimes influenced by our environment and lifestyle. And for those of you who don't know me, I am your host, Dr. Crystal Porter, and I am owner of Main Insights, a company that conducts research to better understand the needs of the hair and scalp. So this lunchtime chat is a live online broadcast platform dedicated to elevating the Black hair care industry and empowering consumers and hair professionals with education that is driven and backed by scientific research. So before we get started, as always, I'd like to know who is all out here. So if you can, please put your name in the chat. That would be great. So I see Dana and hi, Taria. Welcome. Thank you for coming. And then I also want you to let me know what type of viewer are you. So if you are a hair practitioner, please put in the number 1. If you are a consumer, please put in the number 2. And if you are a researcher or scientist like Dr. Jarrad Hampton-Marcell and I, you can put a 3 in the comments. And as always, I would love for you to share this broadcast. Don't be stingy. Invite 5 people that you know. That would be wonderful. And so before we get started, one other thing, I want to make sure that you are viewing as you would want to be, the things that you really want to know about. So if you're frustrated with your hair and you lack information that's available to you when it comes for caring for your hair, or you wasted a lot of money, time, and resources trying to figure things out on your own, you are definitely in the right place. And that is why I created Our Black Hair Matters movement. So one last thing I want to say is we have put together a very valuable resource, and that is the biggest mistakes to avoid when caring for your curly hair. So how you can get it is there should be a link that will be put into the chat and you can press on it. But if you also have concerns and needs and you want to have a conversation with our team, they are standing by, and you can schedule a 15-minute call by going to bit.ly OBHMC ONSULT. That's Our Black Hair Matters Consult abbreviated. All right, so now without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Jarrad Hampton-Marcell. As I said, he is a research scientist and he has a lot of accolades. He has over 25 peer-reviewed publications, and I would say a lot of them are actually in high impact journals. And his research has been featured in Time Magazine. He's been in the Chicago Tribune and WNYC's Radio Lab. And so, Jarrad, welcome. And I would like for you to explain to everyone in layman's terms exactly what you do.
Hey, Dr. Porter, thanks for having me on. So in layman's terms, what I do is that basically I study bacteria that live on people. There's bacteria that we don't know about that live on us, in us. We shed it into our immediate environment, like our homes, hospitals we visit, the cars that we drive, the transit systems that we ride on a day-to-day basis. And the goal of my research is really to understand how these bacteria actually influence human health, and whether we can use these bacteria or capture these bacteria in a way to actually improve our health. And specifically, I actually focus on African Americans, just for the reason that we're very underrepresented in the field, as well as being not a focus when it comes to a lot of the diseases and health states that you see in your everyday life. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. So you do a lot of research and you focus on Black people basically, but one of the things that I think is really lacking, as you said, in terms of us having a lot of data. I want you to explain the concept of what a citizen scientist is, because I think a lot of the things that, or a lot of the information that we don't have about us can really help with that type of initiative. So can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so citizen science is essentially trying to understand how people live, how things affect their life, what works and what doesn't work, lifestyles. But the problem is that a person like myself, who's interested in this, can't do it alone, right? So there's only so many people that I can recruit. There's only so many people that I can sample. There's only so many people that will volunteer for a study like this. And it's more powerful to basically recruit the people who actually care about their life, right? So if you're studying, let's say, obesity within a given community, I could go out and say, hey, I want to recruit 200 people, but it will be more impactful to basically put a call out and ask individuals to participate in that science themselves. So actually making them a part of the study, but as well as promoting the study within itself. And what this does is that it not only expands the reach that the study can actually achieve and understand how these various lifestyles, associations, variances affect human health. But what it also does is that it brings awareness to the field. So now you have individuals who are actively speaking to scientists, telling them what they care about, what they think is important. And then they actually have a platform to not only communicate that need, but also to participate and add to the scientific body of knowledge that's out there. So these are very powerful studies that are happening. They're very hard to get up and running just because of the numbers initiative, obviously money being a factor. But from a understanding standpoint, it's really impactful as far as advancing not only health, but research, as well as really influencing how medicine and science and the advancements are actually happening.
Yeah, so isn't there the opportunity a lot of times when you have a citizen scientist that they actually get to find out what's really going on with them? So not only are they participating, but they're also learning about some of the data and what it means as it pertains to whatever study is going on.
Yeah, so there's kind of like this dual investment, right? So one part of the citizen science is actually being a part of the study yourself. So, I mean, I've submitted tons of samples to other people's studies to learn about my own health. So what type of medications I respond to, what type of bacteria I have in my gut, and what type of foods I do well with and I don't do well with. But the other aspect is now you become a part of a bigger consortium. So now when there's updates and emails, you're on that list. You're getting the firsthand information that you aren't getting on news or some secondary source, where it be like some media site or blog site. You're actually seeing things while it's happening. So it's kind of changing the game right now. And it's a unique opportunity, but it also provides unique challenges as well.
Yeah. So I just want to take a pause and say hello to Irma. Thanks for joining. Deanne, thanks for joining as well. And so if you have any questions for Dr. Jarrad Hampton-Marcell, please post them in the chat. It is a unique opportunity to have the ability to ask questions to someone who is so involved. So make sure you do ask questions. So we're going to continue. So we talked about citizen science, but you were talking about you learn particularly what's going on with yourself. So if you participate in someone's study, you can understand what types of foods you do well with or not do well with. Have you actually made any changes based on that information?
Yeah, actually I have. So one of the things that I found out is that getting older, I'm gaining more weight than I want to. But one of the things is like I don't get a chance to exercise as much, right? So I would love to be able to go to the gym 3, 4, 5 times a day, be able to get on the track and run and all of that good stuff. But that's just not possible, right? So the question is there a better way to not only manage my weight, but to potentially lose weight without having to put in so much effort into exercising, right? So to give you one concrete example is that I participated in the American Gut Project. And one of the things that they do is they give you a dietary analysis. So you submit this really big form, you answer all of these questions, and it tells you about what you respond to, what type of foods you're eating, how much of your carbs are you intaking on a given day, how much should you be taking in, so on and so forth. And what ended up happening is that what I learned is that I needed to change. It wasn't so much the calories I was eating, so I was eating pretty good, but it was the timing that I was eating. So rather than making my biggest meal the first meal in the day, I was making my biggest meal the last meal in the day. Now, the reason that's important is that rather than, so when you sleep, you're most active as far as like burning off fat. But the problem is that I was using the food that I was eating to basically fuel my sleep rather than the fat stores that I actually had during that time. So by changing up my meal plan and eating my biggest meal in the day, light lunch, a moderate to light dinner, what ended up happening is that I didn't have enough energy to fuel myself through the night. And then what ended up happening is that I was burning more fat through the night, and I was losing like a pound a week, and really shedding off a lot of that unwanted weight that I had at that point in time.
Wow. I should have participated in that. That's awesome. All right. I want to make sure that there isn't any question. Okay, so Reese Banks said timing definitely matters. And then Tarita said, yes, changing your meal plan, those little shifts are important. Yes, awesome. And so that leads me into asking about precision medicine or the personalization efforts that are going, like everybody has an ad about, okay, personalize your plan, and me included. And so I want to have you as an expert talk a little bit about that and what it is and why it can be important and what we need to consider, because a lot of people overpromise. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so there, like you said, there's a big shift that's happening, right? So to give you like a little context, everybody. So when we first started battling, like let's say infections, right? Everybody was taking penicillin, everybody, right? And then the problem is that at some point we become resistant to penicillin. So then you start looking for other antibiotics. Same thing applies to human health. So what's good for the masses is like strategy, right? So you have an infection, you go through some type of triage system, you identify what's wrong with that person, and then you treat it in a very standard routine way. That's the way the medical industry has worked for quite some time now. But what we're realizing is that there's more data out now than there has been in the last 100 years combined. And what's happening is that doctors, scientists, healthcare professionals are now realizing that we can start using this data to our advantage, whether it's about where you live, whether it's about what you do, whether it's about your job, or even your own personal health. So case in point, when you look at like a person's risk for obesity or high blood pressure, usually they look at the family history, what you do, what type of job you have, how high risk is that job. And it goes into factoring what you should get tested for. What's happening now is that we're taking that one step forward. Rather than just looking at what you do, who you are, where you live, we're now starting to look at your body. We understand that the human contains a lot of genetic information that isn't just there for no purpose whatsoever. So it actually has something that it can provide. And what we're doing is that we're taking that information and we're trying to use your genome, so your genetic material, to understand how you will respond to certain treatments. So if somebody has, let's say, cancer, God forbidden, what we can do is that we can take a piece of your genetic information, your DNA. We can look at your DNA and we can look at to whether you respond to a certain immunotherapy or to a certain immunosuppressant or to a certain beta therapy or some type of like X-ray or whatever treatment there may be. And then we can use that to basically get an estimation of which treatment will be more effective. And we're taking that into nutrition, we're taking that into health, we're taking that into physical fitness. And the reason being is now we're going from a one step fits all or one size fits all to a customized, personalized approach to understanding your health and treating your health and maximizing your health benefits at any point in time. Now, with that being said, we aren't there yet. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done. There's a lot of research that needs to be done. Case in point, a lot of the genomic research that's out there, a lot of genetic research, it's based off of white Caucasian males. And the problem is that we know African Americans, people of color, indigenous individuals, they don't respond in the same way as Caucasians themselves. So what do we have to do? We have to get more of a representative community. We need more of a diversity pool so that we can go in and look and say, okay, this gene is tied to obesity, or this gene is tied to high blood pressure, or this genetic factor or this environmental factor is associated with cancer or lymphatic problems, so on and so forth. And then given this population, whether it's African American, whether it's Caucasian, whether it's Asian, people of color, we then can go in and say, okay, this would be an appropriate treatment for this lady who is 38 years old, who is Black, who is from the South Side of Chicago, but also has these dietary and these medication patterns. And what that does is it allows us to basically tailor our approach. But like I said before, we're a long ways off from that.
Wow, yeah. All right, so we have a question. How can we help with that research?
Yeah, so be simple. Support Black research, support Black businesses. Here's the thing. As a community, we are probably the least represented group when it comes to research of any race, just because there's a long history of people doing Black people wrong, Tuskegee experiment. I mean, we can go on about that, right? But then also a lot of these experimental drugs tend to be targeted towards African American communities at times. So there's a big distrust of, well, I don't want to be the first one to take an experimental drug or be a part of an experimental system. But what you can do is that you can be a part of an experimental research plan where they just want to monitor your diet, or they want to monitor your work activities, or they want to monitor the type of air you're exposed to. And the reason being is that not only plays a lot, that gives a lot of information to researchers about African American communities, but it also helps inform policy as to how we deal with, or we go about providing funding for African American communities, so on and so forth. And that's kind of where my research is tied into, is that there's this big gap in Black community and Black genomics and understanding the research behind that. So why not provide the fundamental steps and some of the observational steps that we haven't addressed for a long time now?
Yeah, so do you have like a study that you're doing? So I know you have a breadth of different populations that you study, and I know that you've done a lot of work with athletes in particular. But the other thing, and this also addresses Kanisha's question in terms of how can you help? And she also said that she has a salon and salon partners. What I did not say, I did refer to Dr. Jarrad Hampton-Marcell as a colleague, but I did not specify that he is also my research partner. And so with his history and wanting to really make a difference in the health of communities, then, you know, hair health is also important and something that is under researched. So that is something I think, Kanisha, if you put well, I remember who you are, I will definitely reach out to you, because we do need research partners for that particular initiative that we're doing, particularly with the Save Our Scalps initiative. And that is understanding how actually, can you explain that instead of me going on?
Yeah, so like Dr. Porter mentioned, we have a collaboration together that's called Save Our Scalps. And the premise is simple. African American hair is not the same as Caucasian or any other hair, right? And I'm learning this as I go. My wife will probably hit me over the head for some of the stuff that I buy and bring in this house. But the thing is that we know very little about the health of Black women's scalp, their hair, how their hair care practices influence their overall, I don't want to say strength or the healthiness of their hair, but there's a lot of things that we do to our hair, or African American men and women do to their hair, that are actually damaging, that we can't quantify. So one of the things that we wanted to do is that we wanted to start quantifying these practices. We want to start quantifying putting heat to the head. We want to start quantifying the products that we use. We want to look at understanding how what we eat influences the healthiness of our scalp, and so on and so forth. And the only way that we can do that is that we basically call upon the people, understanding that the Citizen Science Project, having research partners, individuals who are actively in the field, can actually provide us with the necessary details as well as the requisite samples that we need in order to conduct these large enough studies. Because the issue is that myself being an outsider looking in, obviously, because I'm not a hair care professional, but also having a very different view as to what I think Black women and Black men need as far as their improvements in their scalp may be different from somebody who's actually doing hair, actually treating various diseases, or actually managing their clients. So what we can do is that we can come together and we can talk about some of the interests that we have as an organization or as a citizen science project, and some of the problems and issues that you see on a day-to-day basis, to say, okay, why is this a problem? And what do you think is happening? And then we can then go back and say, okay, now we're going to set up this design, which may be either getting some samples or collecting dietary data from your subjects, or even just hair samples in itself. And we can then bring that back to the lab. And now what this is doing is that this is basically pushing the industry forward. It's providing scientific based evidence of how to treat Black hair, but it's also basically establishing yourself. So when I say yourself, I'm talking about our research collaborators and our partners as leaders within the field of cutting edge technology, of saying, okay, we're not just going to say, okay, you need to put castor oil or whatever the case on your hair. We can actually quantify this and go in and say, this is what's happening. This is how we think you should treat this. And this is why we think this is happening. So Save Our Scalps is a new movement. We hope that it picks up steam. And we look forward to working with people and seeing what comes from it.
Yeah, thank you for that. The other thing is we actually did preliminary work to see that there is an impact. And so we want to actually, have that be the foundation that we can grow upon. And so there are two things that we did. Just looking at alopecic scalps, meaning scalps that have alopecia or hair loss. And then the other one that we started on is looking at the effects of hair extensions or weaves. And so we definitely see differences as a result of for those who wear them versus those who don't, and for those, the environment, the microbial environment for those who have alopecia versus those who don't. So we are trying to build on that. So thank you so much, Kanisha, for being interested, because we want to definitely propel that forward. So thank you. Now, Taria wanted to have us address the issue of trust and with studies. And I have a personal story based on me heading up a lot of the international hair collections. I think I mentioned this on an earlier broadcast, but I found that with me looking like or being representative of the people that I'm actually collecting samples from, that actually put them at ease, them seeing that the research work was headed up by people who look like them. So that's why Jared and I are doing this. We really want to make sure that we are in charge of the research, but also can extend ourselves as being someone that you can trust.
Yeah.
You want to expound on that in terms of level of trust?
Yeah, I mean, the trust is, it's multi-level, right? There's the historical aspect of learning about studies that have been performed on Black people that makes you say, okay, do these companies, do these individuals have our interests at heart? But then there's also the lack of evidence or the lack of data that exists around just Black people in general, right? So it's like, okay, you hear about these studies, but then they tell you it was performed on white women or Indian women of a certain demographic that has nothing to do with you. So then now you ask, well, what does this have to do with me? Or how does this apply to me? But then, like Dr. Porter said, there's also the aspect of then taking that initiative to say, okay, I want to be a part of this, but then seeing that the people who are trying to collect samples from you aren't African American or aren't people of color. So, there's multiple levels to it. The issue, and there's tons of issues that I don't want to get into because I go down a rabbit hole about why they are the way they are. But the issue is that there needs to be more, someone needs to take that first step. I feel like Dr. Porter and myself are taking that first step to basically be transparent about what we do. be transparent about what the end goal is, and also be transparent whether it's helping or not. Because a lot of companies will advertise saying, hey, buy this product, and it doesn't help. So what we want to do is arm the consumer as well as the practitioner with information that they can use that will then help them make informed decisions down the road. So the trust is the two-way street, right? There needs to be open conversations on both ends, where I can tell you why we're doing this, what's going on, what we expect to see, and you can tell me what's happening on your end, and then being able to modulate or alter the study in a way that's beneficial for both groups.
Absolutely. Interesting you say that, Dr. Jared. I always call you Jared, so I have to remember this.
That's all right.
It's interesting you say that because we've had some dialogue on the Our Black Hair Matters movement page, and it's been some discussion that has really made me realize the importance of us having even more dialogue. So the scientists and the hair practitioners, because I think we see things through two different lenses. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in the scientific way of doing things that we oftentimes forget the practicality of it. And so, Kanisha, thank you for wanting to encourage your customers, to be more comfortable in submitting samples. That's actually really what we want, whether it be for hair or not. And so just, being a part of the conversation that we're having right now, at least makes you aware of some of the opportunities for improvement for not only our hair health, but our, total body health as well. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it. Want to say hello to Jacqueline, and then I thought I saw someone else join. Oh, and Renee, thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate having you here. So you already basically talked about the question that I had about, where do you think we're headed in terms of making advancements in hair science? And that's really what it is. It's closing that gap of communication between professionals. Of course, it's also advantageous to have the medical community in as well. So so they are researchers as well, but some of them just don't have the time to devote to research efforts because it takes a lot of time to do it. But we want to kind of be that bridge between the medical profession, the researchers, and then also the practitioners. So thank you for explaining that. Now, also you talked about the being a proponent for research collaboration and why it's important. So that's cool. So let's talk about all the misinformation and advertisements out there. There are so many platforms that talk about personalization and, how it can be advantageous. And of course, as I said, that's something that we're doing. We're really focusing on making sure that you can find out what's going on with you so we can all together learn whether or not it's impactful. But what are some of the key things that people why should people believe us, and why should they be skeptical over all the information that's given?
Man, all right. Where do we start? Okay, so the way I see this, let's start with companies first, right? So you see certain companies promoting products saying it's good for the microbiome or it promotes a healthy microbiome, right? But the problem is that obviously these are campaigns to sell a product, to make a profit, and there's nothing wrong with that. And they probably are doing some type of research behind that to validate those claims in some sense. The problem that I have with when people make blanket statements like that is that they don't give a qualifier as to how they came to that claim, right? So because they're companies and they have these patents and these IPs, they don't have to share, right? There's no incentive for them to share because people out here are competition, right?
Yeah.
But the thing that bothers me when people make statements like that is that, one, as a scientist who studies the microbiome, and like that's literally like my bread and butter, this is what I've been doing for the last 11 odd years, is that I don't even know exactly what a healthy microbiome means in terms of a clinical sense, right? And when I say clinical sense, I'm specifically talking about improving a certain health state, right? So like if you have dry skin, or if you have dermatitis, or you have let's say eczema, so on and so forth. Yes, there's tons of research that focuses on that, but all of it is fundamental, or it's applied in some sense. No, very few people are actually doing clinical studies of saying there's this bacteria, by putting it back into the system, that it's going to restore, is going to basically hit the reset button and everything will be fine for X amount of time, right? But yet we get these companies, they say, oh, they use these big words like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium and streptococcus and so on and so forth. And people are like, oh yeah, it gotta be good for you. But then a person like me, or a person who actually does that work within the field, we're like, yeah, everybody uses that stuff. So and my personal opinion is, when we talk about the microbiome and we talk about manipulating a person's microbiome to improve health, one of the caveats that I give to people is that it's like dropping or pouring a cup of water into the ocean, expecting sea levels to rise. And that's not going to happen, right? So if we really want to get at what these claims are being made, make this data available. Make this so that researchers like myself can go in and we can start teasing this apart. Because the last thing that a company wants is somebody who specializes in the area that they're trying to make a product in go back and just rip their study apart. And this happens in the scientific community all the time. Like we see a bogus study, or we see some claims that just don't make sense. We'll go and pull their data from an open source repository and start reworking their entire analysis to make sure that these claims are justified. And I think that's what's missing from a lot of I want to say the hair care field in a general sense. And I feel like they're following in the footsteps of the nutrition industry, right? So if you look at the nutrition industry back in the 90s, it was all, oh yeah, eat this, eat that promotes this, so on and so forth. And then scientists actually started looking at the data about milk and all of this other stuff. And they're like, this isn't validated. Like vitamin D just really isn't that big of a thing. But the problem is that they didn't have to share data. But now that we're at the point where we're now starting to make things public, available to the public, we're now requiring validation. We're now requiring transparency. I feel like the hair industry is following that mode. So like a lot of these claims, I don't want to get sued. So I'm gonna say I don't believe a lot of them. I have a big issue with a lot of the claims that are happening, but also get that it's business. And people will do what's advantageous to make a profit. But yeah, there's a lot of context that gets left out when people are selling these products, especially the stuff that you see in commercials and online, especially when they're saying like one probiotic, or take a shot of this prebiotic, or whatever the case may be, and it'll restore everything. That's bullshit. I'm gonna be honest. That's bullshit. So, hey.
Okay. All right. Thank you for being transparent. I think it's important because a lot of times people don't really understand the process in terms of where or how we need to proceed. Because people want the answers like right now, right? And they're like, hey, let me know what I need to do. But that's one of the reasons why I'm stepping forward in the way that I'm doing. Because the first step is to get to hair practitioners who are knowledgeable. They have to be knowledgeable about products, and they have to be knowledgeable about the different information or data that we get and how to process it in a way that they can say, okay, I now have this specific information about this particular client. Let me use my expertise and be able to help. And then in the midst of us collecting the data, then we'll be able to get some data and see some trends. Then we'll be able to disseminate information that will allow them to make even more informed decisions about the health of their clients' hair. So we all have to work in tandem, right?
True. And I mean, it goes back to, like you're saying, like it has to be, to really see an improvement, it has to be a change in practice, right? Like you can't do something one time and expect a result instantaneously, unless it's medication, right? Unless you're getting some type of like antibiotic or some type of drug inducing pill that changes the chemistry or targets some specific gene. But when it comes to a lot of these hair care practices, I'll call them nutraceuticals. So like people who are prebiotics, probiotics, all of these things that aren't FDA regulated because they don't have to be. It also comes with a change in lifestyle. You can't just do one thing and say, oh, I want to grow my hair out, and then not take care of your hair for like the next month. Like it won't work like that, right? But with these combined practices, then presents itself to look at the data that happens between these combined practices. And then you can start to look at like how your lifestyle change, emphasis on the lifestyle ultimately impacts your health. So the way I look at it is the same way you look at like exercise, right? Like you want to change your body, you got to stick to the routine, you got to stick to the diet, you just have to follow up, and not following up won't get you the results that you want.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. So Lisa, thank you for joining. And then Taria said that the information, well, you think the information in terms of context is good too. Yeah. And I think you spoke up on that, Dr. Jarrad Hampton-Marcell. Awesome. So why is it important to consider the source from where you get your information and advice? Man, you know what? So let me start off by saying I am not against people who are on YouTube giving advice about hairstyles. And I say that, and I'm very specific because I think the creativity for, those who can achieve the look that you want to make women and men feel beautiful, like the man weave, I think that that's so darn creative. I mean, I think that's awesome. However, when it comes to people talking about health and what's good for them and how it should translate into what would be good for others, there's a problem. And so I want to talk about that a little bit because everybody is out there talking about what they say is the gospel. And so what is the procedure for what should we take into consideration when we hear what people are saying? Who should we listen to?
Yeah, man. So, okay. So here's the thing. Do your research. To the people out there, like, okay, so I get it. There are personalities, there are people who you follow and they give good advice, right? They have tips and tricks, and it works at times. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's always healthy, right? We thought lead paint was a good idea until we found out the ramifications 20 years down the road. So when it comes to media sources, so let's just stick with information right now. When it comes to written information, always, even if it's like a popular source, so let's say you're getting it from some blog, whatever the case may be, fact check them on where they got that information from. Because the majority of the information that they're getting is coming from another secondhand source if they're not a big major news company, right? It takes money and it takes time to dig into people's research that a lot of these smaller companies don't have access to or the time to do. So they're getting secondhand or third-hand information, and they're saying, "Oh yeah, eat beets because beets will strengthen the hair follicles, so on and so forth." And then they'll leave it at that, right? Like there's no justification. They don't know where that information came from. So I'm not saying that you have to discredit what everybody says, but if it's not coming from a publication where scientists have provided rigor and did the testing and the stats and had it reviewed by a number of their peers who then said, oh, you need to go back and fix this section because it doesn't make sense or it's misleading. If it isn't coming from there, or you aren't reading those things, which is totally fine. You don't have to read those. That doesn't have to be your life. At least know where they're getting their information from. Whether it's CNBC, whether it's some beauty magazine that you're reading, or if it's some professional. And the thing is that if they know what they're doing and they know their stuff, they'll be able to tell you, oh, I got this from the journal of such and such, so and so, or there's this study that just came out and it's using this said approach, so on and so forth. Like people who are good at their job or are good at their being able to disseminate information to the public will understand how to validate what they're saying, because at the end of the day, nobody wants to get sued, right? So you're always going to have some source you can reference, and people who can't, like, leave that stuff alone. If it feels too good to be true, oftentimes it is, even when it comes down to health effects. And I won't get into the specific products that I can't stand to see people use, but we use a lot of stuff that really gets under my skin. So yeah.
No, you raise a good point. And Renee says consistency, compliance, and commitment. I like that. And then Kanisha says that she has considered sitting her sources on a blog post that are more sciencey. Don't want to confuse folks, but confuse folks more, but I am thinking it will help. Yeah, so that I tell my students all the time, you know, before you say anything, just put it in context, like Ms. Taria said. You know, you really need to make sure that if it's something that's based on your experience, then say, based on my experience, this is what I believe, or what you've observed, because that's one of the reasons why we need to have dialogue with the people who are there with their fingertips in the data, because they have experiences. I think when people run into problems is basically when they say that they make just statements as if they're fact. They don't have anything to back it up on. And if you at least can say, I read this, you know, in such and such a place or spot, it actually gets you off the hook. Because if it is wrong, you can say, well, I got that information there and I thought, you know, it was a trustworthy source. So, I mean, you can get yourself off the hook doing it that way. But Kanisha, I would say, you know, you have sciencey in quotes. And so, unfortunately, a lot of people get their sources off of doing a Google search. And that's just not the right way to really do research. So I would say if you do have trusted sources, for example, with dermatology, the American Academy of Dermatology is a great resource. You know, if you're talking about anything that has to do with like chemistry of what's going on or change in the chemistry, anything in biological sciences or chemistry would be great. You know, so there are associations and organizations that have more credibility in the field. So just being aware of that is extremely important.
Yeah. But to follow up on that, one thing I always tell people to do who are getting secondhand information, get it from, most of these journals have like a magazine where they highlight the research that's in their journal. So subscribe to one of those, and they're usually writing that in layman's term. They're usually trying to get it to the general public so that people are aware of what that journal is doing, what people are submitting, and use that as a reference guide to be like, hey, this came from the journal of such and such, where they talk about this new technique, so on and so forth. There's nothing wrong with qualifying your statements, right? Just because by qualifying your statements, you basically state your position of either this is my personal belief, like Dr. Porter said, or this is a belief of somebody who's done X, Y, Z, so on and so forth. And by having those like consumer journals, and I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a subscription, you're going to pay for it, but it gives you the information that you need to say, okay, hey, this is where I'm getting my sources from, and this is why I'm applying it in this way.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. That's a great point, to use journals as a reference point. Absolutely. Absolutely. Or like I said, associations and organizations who are known. So an example, I have a study on the benefits of oils on the hair. I would link to the original study. My post is about why we use coconut oil. Also, it puts some science into our findings over the years. Okay. Yeah. So why we use coconut oil. So yeah, that's the good thing about that is that there is literature to show the benefits of coconut oil. So you're starting in a good space, because there is lots of literature out there about that. So that's nice. Good job. All right. So what should people consider when buying products and services that are based on science? I mean, so what things can they do? Are there any buzz terms that are put out there that you're like, ooh, red flag should go up? Or are there things that, you know, you think that are out there that people can rely on?
Man, this is, so I personally am very dismissive about a lot of products until I see the data behind things. So what I've been learning is if it doesn't have an MSDS, don't trust it. So like if you don't know what the composition of said thing is, usually you want to stay away from it, especially when people are just saying like, oh yeah, we use this all the time, and then you be like, what's in it? And they're like, well, oil. And so I mean, so MSDS. So what's an MSDS, Dr. Ford? If you might want to take this one.
Okay, yeah, the MSDS is Material Safety Data Sheet. That is something that for anyone who dabbles with products such as hair practitioners, anybody who works with like raw materials or ingredients, they must come with the Material Safety Data Sheet, because that lets you know what the consistency of it, if there are any warnings or hazards. It just lets you know, like if you were to get it in your eye or whatever, it gives you instructions on what you should consider. So that is the importance of a material safety data sheet. So yeah, so note to infant probiotics.
So as you can see, me and my wife get into this all the time. But so I mean, I'm not against probiotics, especially for younger individuals, just because a lot of their bacteria are still developing, not only on their skin but in their gut. But like I said before, it's something that needs to be routine. It needs to be a lifestyle that you're adding to that infant, and there needs to be a clear. One thing that I don't like is that, and I hate to say it like this, doctors will give a probiotic just because that's what they think is they think the infant needs. So they'll say, oh, they need more lactobacillus because a lot of these guidelines are recommending more short chain fatty acid production. Don't worry about what that means. It's something, right? But the thing is that then it becomes, okay, what type of probiotic are you recommending? Because no probiotic is FDA approved whatsoever. And there's a lot of reasons why we can get into that, but just know that probiotics are never FDA approved. They get to skip outside of that realm. So then it becomes which brand is actually advertising the concentration or the organisms that are the bacteria that are actually in it. Because a lot of them will say, oh, we're using 12 different bacterial strands. Did you grow those things? Did you then get the ratios right of which ones need to be more prominent within that mixture? Are they all doing specific things? And then what's the additive to keep them fresh? Because these are live cultures or live organisms that you're now shipping. So you're going to have to add some type of secondary compound to either keep them stable or to keep them from growing and using up all of the stuff that they're housed in, what type of medium. So it then becomes kind of like a Russian roulette of which one is actually right for my child or for me or for my mother or my father, so on and so forth. And then that gets back to the whole point that we were talking about before, about this whole precision medicine and personalized nutrition and understanding how your body is going to actually respond to what you're giving to it when it's not FDA approved, which could be, there could be a ton of variables that's included in that.
Yeah, so I want to get a little bit more specific when it comes to FDA approved, because a lot of us make the assumptions that the FDA actually will have you send samples to them and then they have their stamp of approval. And that is what is not happening. So it's really the honor system. So they do have guidelines that they give in terms of they expect a product that is on the shelf that, you know, especially if you're ingesting them or putting it on your body as a cosmetic, then they do expect you to adhere to certain guidelines, but they don't police it unless there is a lot of problems. So it's not just one report or someone raising suspicion. It has to be a number of people complaining about it, because in all honesty, there are so many products out there. They don't have the time to check everything. And so when Dr. Jared says it's not FDA approved, it means that it hasn't gone through any rigorous or a lot of times it hasn't gone through anything rigorous. However, there are certain organizations or some like cosmetic companies who actually do have a high standard of rigor when it comes to making sure that their products are safe. And I say this, and I'm going to say it, but that's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about the Our Black Hair Matters movement, because I think there are, I know there are a lot of smaller companies, unfortunately, who cut corners. And so I think it's very important for these small companies to get the data to back up what it is they're saying, because that's the only way we're going to elevate the industry. And even though my expertise is in hair science, it needs to go across the board. So when you're talking about supplements and probiotics, I think we as a community, as a population, as citizens of the United States, we are responsible for making sure that we ask questions and that we hold whoever we buy products from to standards that are higher, so we make sure that we are taken care of. So when Dr. Jarrad Hampton-Marcell said that it's important for us to do our research, it really is important for us to do our research, because unless we hold them in, accountable, then those shortcuts will continue, and that's not doing anything for us. And so, as Dr. Jarrad Hampton-Marcell mentioned earlier, when it comes to the Black population in particular, we don't have a lot of data out there about us, and that's a problem. And we should be saying it's a problem, and we need to do something about it. So I really applaud your efforts and what you're doing, particularly with the Black population.
Appreciate it.
So thank you about that. Yeah, it's awesome. So we have a little bit more time. Make sure there aren't any other questions. Love the topic. Okay, to be addressed regarding probiotics as well as prebiotics. Oh, so you want to talk about the differences between pre and pro?
Yeah. So I'll give a quick overview. So prebiotic. So there's two type of like modulations when it comes to bacteria, right? A prebiotic is basically some type of supplement, organic, some type of vitamin, something that's going to stimulate the bacteria that you already have in you or on your skin, or something that you're interacting with. And the idea is that there are certain bacteria that you want to promote within your system because they offer protective effects. So like, for example, people who get stomach bacterial or viral stomach infections is because of a certain bacteria that gets removed from the stomach itself, which protects them from getting that stomach infection. So what you want to do is you'll take a prebiotic to promote those organisms so that they stay there, they maintain, they are healthy, that they're able to maintain kind of like their dominance within your system. And then the idea is that by giving them the environment that they want, it helps to ensure or helps to promote your health. Now, probiotic is the exact opposite of that. You may be lacking or devoid of some organism that you're interested in or that you need within your system in order to maintain your health. So what companies will try to do is engineer a bacteria, or basically grow a bacteria and put it into pill form that you then can take, which they hope will then supplement itself in you or implant itself in you and continue to grow. And that way it's replacing what you are lacking at that point in time. So that's kind of like the general differences between the two. Now, how they're regulated are entirely different, because one contains what we consider an active culture, which is the bacteria. So that has certain guidelines versus being like a supplement or a vitamin or some type of like nutrient, some like same way you would get like you take vitamin D pills. So they're regulated entirely different. Now, the question is, which one should you take now, right? So is it better to take a prebiotic or is it better to take a probiotic? And long story short, we don't know. to be honest. We know that there are certain bacteria that we need in order to promote health. So if you look, anybody who has a probiotic, go grab the pill case. The two things you'll see on the back, it's called lactobacillus. Another one will be bifidobacterium. Those are always the basis of any probiotic, just because we know the effects of those organisms and we know the benefits of those organisms. Now the problem is that there are multiple different types of those organisms. So there may be 2,000 different bifidobacteriums, and there may be 2,000 different lactobacillus bacteria. So the question is, which type or which version do you need, and then how much of that version do you need, or do you need multiple versions? And this gets back, like I said before, the whole precision medicine thing. The prebiotic, honestly, it's also, most of the prebiotics, I tell people, you can really look at your diet first. What are you eating? Get that analyzed. There are tons of studies. Like, one of the things that Save Our Scalps does is that we offer dietary analyses. So look to see what you're eating. Are you getting your recommended daily values? Are you over your caloric limits? Are you not getting some micronutrient that is associated with hair growth, like folic acid, and so on and so forth? So understanding the components and the aspects of your diet can help you understand what you need to be supplementing your body with, especially like the same way that doctors supplement women who are pregnant. You need more of certain things, just because the baby is gonna take as much of that store as it can get. But that's all based off of research. Years and years and years of research. So we need to get to that same point when it comes to prebiotic and probiotic, not only development, but also utilization.
Awesome. Thank you for it. That was really detailed. So Renee, hope that answered your question. So I have a couple more questions. I think I can only get to one. So let's talk about, are there any initiatives that you want our viewers to know about in which they can participate? I guess that kind of goes what Kanisha was talking about earlier.
Yeah. So the first initiative I'll mention, I think we've said it a couple of times, is Save Our Scalps. One thing that Dr. Porter and myself are trying to do is really understand African American hair, Black hair, and to understand how the products that we use, the environment that we live in, and the foods that we eat affect our hair. Another initiative that I'm personally booting up at the University of Illinois, Chicago, is an African American metagenomic study. So basically, I'm trying to understand how what we do, who we are, where we live affects our overall health. And one of the things that I'll be doing is, one aspect is the dietary analysis that I talked about before. Another thing will be understanding how you exercise, which is a big thing to me, being a former athlete, just because exercise is considered probably the only or one of the biggest alternatives to taking medication, right? People who exercise have lower blood pressure. They're at less risk for diabetes and all these other diseases. So what I want to do is understand, what is it from a DNA perspective that actually influences our health. And if we can do things like changing our diet, changing the quality of air around us, changing how we interact with various spaces, can be influenced or actually promote our health. And then the last thing is I'm a part of a number of consortiums that are geared towards basically promoting DEI around science. So getting more African Americans within leadership positions, getting more Black women, Black men, and also culturing and nurturing the youth to basically provide them with the tools that they need, for those who are interested in science, to give them the tools that they need starting as early as high school, via a program that I have called AXO. So those are the biggest things that are going on, that I'm constantly pushing and promoting at all points in time. So
yeah, you keep yourself busy. I am oftentimes amazed. You're also, my daughter's mentor, so I really appreciate that. She has someone very smart and a leader in the industry to help navigate her way as she tries to figure out what she wants to do with her life. So thank you.
nothing wrong with that. She's awesome.
All right. So, all right. Make sure that was great. Thank you both. Yes, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And remember, if you have any, so do you want to leave any contact information? Just in case, so if you have initiatives, how can they reach out to you to participate?
Yeah, so anybody that wants to reach me can reach me on my email. It's my second last name, so Marcell, the number 2 at uic.edu. That is my main contact. Reach out to me about anything that you may have science related. If you want to collaborate, if you're interested in just learning more about yourself, I'm usually accessible via email, and I usually can get back pretty quickly nowadays. Now that I'm not doing 20 other things all at once. So.
Okay, well, thank you guys for joining. Really appreciate it. And if you have any pressing concerns or need to have a conversation, anything pertaining to your hair health or your scalp health, or if you want to participate in the study, because we do have some people who express a desire, then you can schedule a 15-minute consultation by going to bit.ly/OBHM consult. All right, and that'll be in the chat. So thank you guys, and as always, take care and love on hair. Bye-bye.